The event of the first revelation, known in Islamic tradition as the beginning of the nubuwah or prophethood, stands as the single most pivotal moment in the history of Islam, representing the nexus where the terrestrial and the celestial converged within the solitude of a mountain cave. This occurrence, which transpired in the year 610 of the Common Era, did not unfold in a vacuum but was the culmination of a period of intense spiritual seeking undertaken by Muhammad ibn Abdullah, a respected merchant of Mecca known for his integrity and contemplative nature. For several years preceding this event, he had developed a practice of retreating to the cave of Hira, a small cavern on the mountain of Jabal al-Nur, the Mountain of Light, located a few miles outside the bustling polytheistic city. There, in extended periods of seclusion, a practice known as tahanuth, he would meditate, pray, and reflect upon the state of his society, which was characterized by rampant idolatry, social injustice, economic exploitation, and tribal warfare. His retreats were driven by a profound dissatisfaction with the prevailing spiritual and moral decay and an innate monotheistic inclination, a concept known in Islam as the fitra, the natural disposition to recognize a single creator. It was during one of these solitary vigils in the last 10 nights of the month of Ramadan that the divine intervention which would alter the course of human history took place. According to the most authenticated accounts preserved in Hadith literature while he was in the cave, the angel Gabriel, or Jibril in Arabic, appeared before him in a powerful, overwhelming manifestation. The sheer intensity of this first encounter with a celestial being filled Muhammad with a profound sense of terror and awe, an experience that was both physically and psychologically jarring. The angel seized him and commanded him with a single powerful word, "Iqra," meaning read or recite. The response of Muhammad to this divine imperative is a critical component of the narrative, highlighting his humanity and the unmediated nature of the revelation. Overwhelmed by the encounter and being unlettered, he replied, "I am not a reader, ma ana bi qari." His answer was not one of defiance but of sincere inability, reflecting the reality of his own human limitations in the face of a supernatural command. Classical Islamic scholars emphasize that his illiteracy was not a deficiency but a divinely ordained state, serving as irrefutable proof that the sublime, eloquent, and scientifically prescient text of the Quran could not have been his own composition, thereby negating any future claims that he had authored it by drawing upon existing literary or religious traditions. The angel Gabriel, however, repeated the command, this time seizing him more forcefully, pressing him to the point of exhaustion before releasing him and ordering again, "Iqra." Muhammad again gave the same response, conveying his utter helplessness. The angel then seized him for a third and final time, pressing him with such immense force that he felt he could bear no more, and upon releasing him delivered the first 5 verses of what would become the 96th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Alaq, the clinging clot. The words that broke the centuries of divine silence since the time of Jesus were, "Read, in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not." With these words, the process of divine revelation, or wahi, to the final prophet had begun, initiating a 23-year period during which the entirety of the Quran would be revealed piece by piece to guide humanity. The immediate aftermath of this experience left Muhammad physically trembling and deeply shaken, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. He scrambled down from the mountain and rushed home to his wife, Khadija bint Khuwaylid, seeking solace and understanding. The first lesson derived from the circumstances of the revelation is the profound spiritual significance of solitude and contemplation as a precursor to divine connection. The Prophet Muhammad's practice of tahanuth in the cave of Hira was not an accidental precursor to his prophethood, but a necessary period of spiritual preparation, representing a deliberate withdrawal from the distractions and corruptions of worldly life, or dunya, in order to purify the heart and orient the soul towards a higher truth. This act of seeking seclusion for the purpose of worship and reflection, known in Sufi traditions as khalwa, demonstrates that a degree of detachment from the mundane is often essential for achieving spiritual clarity. In the context of pre-Islamic Mecca, a city consumed by commerce, tribal loyalties, and the worship of 360 idols housed within the Kaaba, the Prophet's retreat signifies a conscious rejection of a society that had lost its moral and spiritual compass. He was seeking answers to fundamental questions about creation, purpose, and the nature of the divine, questions which the polytheistic rituals and social injustices of his time could not address. Islamic theology teaches that this period of isolation allowed his heart to become a polished vessel, cleansed of the impurities of his environment, and thus prepared to receive the immense weight of the divine word. For every Muslim, this serves as a powerful reminder that spiritual growth requires intentional effort, including carving out time for introspection, remembrance of Allah, dhikr, and deep reflection, tafakkur, on the signs of God in creation and within oneself. In a modern world saturated with constant noise, information overload, and endless distractions, the lesson of the Cave of Hira is more pertinent than ever, teaching that clarity and divine guidance are often found not in the crowd, but in the disciplined quiet of a soul turned towards its Creator. It establishes a principle that true understanding begins with a sincere and searching heart that is willing to step away from the consensus of a misguided society to seek a more profound reality. A second foundational lesson emerges from the very nature of the encounter: the immense and overwhelming power of divine revelation, wahi. The experience of the Prophet was not a gentle internal inspiration, but a physically and psychologically taxing event that underscored the vast chasm between the human and the divine realms. Hadith literature provides numerous accounts describing the intense physical toll that receiving revelation took upon him throughout his prophetic mission. His companions reported that on cold days his forehead would be covered in perspiration. If he were riding a camel, the animal would be forced to sit down under the sheer weight of the divine message. And at times he would hear a sound like the ringing of a bell, which he described as the most difficult form of revelation to bear. This physical manifestation serves a critical theological purpose. It authenticates the external and objective source of the Quran. The message was not a product of his own consciousness, subconscious thought, or epileptic seizures as some Orientalist critics have historically alleged, but a transmission from a powerful external source delivered by the Archangel Gabriel. The terror and awe he experienced in the cave were the natural human reactions to coming into contact with the uncreated celestial realm. This teaches a crucial lesson about the proper disposition of a believer towards the word of Allah. The Quran is not to be approached as just another book of philosophy, history, or literature. It is the direct, uncreated speech of the Creator of the heavens and the earth. This understanding demands a state of reverence, humility, and spiritual attentiveness when reciting or studying its verses. The physical weight of the revelation on the Prophet symbolizes the spiritual weight and importance of its message for humanity. It is a guide that is both a mercy and a warning, a source of light and a heavy responsibility. And its reception, both for the Prophet and for those who follow him, necessitates a complete reorientation of one's being and priorities, shaking the soul from its state of heedlessness, kafla. The third, and perhaps most intellectually significant lesson, is embedded in the first command itself: Ikra, read. The fact that the inaugural word of a 23-year-long divine revelation delivered to an unlettered prophet in a predominantly illiterate society was a command to read is of monumental importance. This single word establishes the primacy of knowledge, ilm, as the cornerstone of the Islamic worldview. It is not a call to blind faith, but an invitation to a faith founded upon knowledge, reason, and understanding. The command to read is repeated in the first 5 verses, followed by the mention of the pen as the instrument of teaching, reinforcing the inseparable link between Islam and the pursuit of learning. Islamic scholars have expounded that the term Iqra encompasses a spectrum of meanings beyond simple literacy. It means to read, to recite, to proclaim, and to study. It is an injunction to read the revealed Word of God as contained in the Scripture, and also to read the book of the universe, to observe and contemplate the signs, ayat, of Allah in the natural world, in the cosmos, in the intricate design of living organisms, and in the patterns of history. This divine decree effectively launched a civilization that would become a beacon of learning for centuries, inspiring the establishment of libraries, universities, and scientific institutions from Cordoba to Baghdad. It sanctified the act of seeking knowledge, elevating it to the level of worship. An authenticated hadith states that seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim male and female. This initial command fundamentally shaped the Muslim psyche, creating a deep-seated reverence for scholars, ulama, and fostering a tradition of critical inquiry, textual analysis, and intellectual rigor in fields ranging from jurisprudence, fiqh, and theology, aqeedah, to medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. The lesson for the contemporary Muslim is that a vibrant, authentic faith is one that is intellectually engaged and committed to education, both religious and secular, as a means of understanding the Creator and fulfilling one's purpose on earth. The fourth profound lesson is found in the Prophet's immediate human reaction and the subsequent role of his wife, Khadijah. His response of "I am not a reader," and the state of profound fear and vulnerability in which he returned from the cave serve as a testament to his genuine humanity and the authenticity of his experience. He did not emerge from the cave as a self-proclaimed arrogant seer, but as a terrified and bewildered man, seeking comfort and explanation. This humility is a hallmark of true prophethood, distinguishing him from the soothsayers, kahin, and poets of his time who often feigned supernatural contact for personal gain or prestige. His reaction validates the external nature of the message. It was something that happened to him, not something that arose from him. Furthermore, the narrative immediately highlights the critical importance of a strong, supportive family structure in the foundation of the Islamic mission. When he rushed home, trembling and crying out, "Cover me, cover me," it was Khadijah who provided immediate comfort, reassurance, and unwavering belief. She did not dismiss his experience as a hallucination or a sign of madness. Instead, she affirmed his character, saying, "By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your kith and kin, help the poor and the destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving calamity-afflicted ones." Her words were not just emotional solace, they were a logical deduction. She reasoned that a person of his impeccable moral character would not be tormented or deceived by God or by evil forces. She became the first person to accept Islam, her immediate faith providing the Prophet with the essential psychological and emotional anchor he needed to process the monumental event. This dynamic teaches that the family unit is the first line of support in the path of faith, and that the role of a righteous spouse is one of profound spiritual significance, providing the stability and strength necessary to face immense challenges. The fifth lesson is a core theological principle introduced in the first revealed verses, the concept of rububiyyah, or the absolute lordship of Allah. The command to read is immediately contextualized. In the name of your Lord, Rab, who created. This phrase establishes the fundamental relationship between the human being and the divine, that of a creation to its creator and sustainer. The term Rab in Arabic is incredibly rich, encompassing the meanings of Lord, Master, Creator, Sustainer, Cherisher, Provider, and Regulator. By identifying Allah as your Lord who created, the revelation immediately strikes at the heart of the Meccan polytheistic system, shirk. While the Quraysh tribe generally acknowledged a supreme creator God, they diluted his sovereignty by associating lesser deities with him, believing these idols could act as intermediaries for intercession and provide for specific needs. The verse refutes this by asserting that the same Lord who initiated creation is the one in whose name all actions, including the act of reading and learning, must begin. It recentralizes all authority and power in a single transcendent being, laying the foundation for the uncompromising monotheism, Tawheed, that is the central message of Islam. The subsequent verse, created man from a alaq, a clinging clot, reinforces this by reminding humanity of its humble and fragile physical origin, a state of complete dependence on its creator. This dual emphasis on God's creative power and humanity's created nature is designed to instill a sense of humility and gratitude, which are the basis of worship, ibadah. The lesson is that true faith and righteous action can only proceed from a correct understanding of who God is and who we are in relation to Him. Recognizing Allah as the sole Rabb liberates the human mind from superstition, the worship of created things, and submission to any authority other than the ultimate authority of the Creator Himself. It is the foundational truth upon which the entire edifice of Islamic belief and practice is built. The sixth lesson, flowing directly from the mention of human creation, is the Quran's unique approach to describing human origins and its implications for human self-perception. The verse, created man from a alaq, is a statement of profound theological and, as many contemporary Muslim scholars argue, scientific significance. The word alaq has a triple meaning in classical Arabic: a clinging thing, a leech-like substance, and a blood clot. Each of these meanings finds a remarkable parallel in the early stages of human embryological development as understood by modern science. The embryo in its initial phase clings to the uterine wall. It resembles a leech in shape, and it is related to the formation of blood vessels and clots. While the primary purpose of the verse is theological, to humble human beings by reminding them of their lowly physical beginnings, the scientific precision has been cited by many as a sign of the Quran's divine origin, containing knowledge that could not have been known to any human being in 7th century Arabia. This lesson operates on two levels. Theologically, it serves as a powerful antidote to human arrogance, kibr. The individual who contemplates that their existence began as a microscopic, dependent, leech-like entity is less inclined to exhibit pride, tyranny, or a sense of self-sufficiency. It fosters a worldview where humanity, despite its intellectual and spiritual capacities, remains fundamentally a creation utterly dependent on the Creator for its existence and sustenance from the embryonic stage until death. On a secondary level, it encourages a harmonious relationship between faith and reason, or revelation and scientific inquiry. It suggests that the study of the natural world, including the biological sciences, is not opposed to faith but can be a means of deepening it, as the observation of creation leads to a greater appreciation for the power and wisdom of the Creator. It is a call to read the signs of God not only in Scripture but also in the very fabric of our own physical being. The seventh lesson is an elaboration on the divine attributes and the means of human progress, encapsulated in the verses, "Read, and your Lord is the most generous, al-Akram, who taught by the pen al-Kalam, taught man that which he knew not. Here the revelation shifts from the act of creation to the act of education. Allah identifies himself not just as the creator but as Al-Akram, the most generous. His generosity is directly linked to the act of teaching. The ultimate expression of divine generosity is not merely the provision of physical sustenance, but the bestowal of knowledge, which elevates humanity from a state of ignorance to enlightenment. This establishes a direct correlation between divine grace and human learning. The instrument mentioned for this teaching is the pen, al-kalam. The pen is a powerful symbol for all forms of recorded knowledge, including scripture, law, history, science, and literature. It represents the preservation and transmission of knowledge across generations, allowing for the cumulative growth of human civilization. In a culture that prized oral tradition, the emphasis on the written word was revolutionary. It signaled a shift towards a tradition based on a preserved, verifiable text, protecting the divine message from the corruption and loss inherent in purely oral transmission. The final phrase, taught man that which he knew not, is a comprehensive statement about the human condition. It affirms that all human knowledge, whether acquired through revelation or through empirical discovery, is ultimately a gift from Allah. It acknowledges the vastness of human ignorance and the limitless potential for learning, which is only realized through divine grace. This lesson instills a profound sense of humility in the pursuit of knowledge, reminding the scholar that their intellectual achievements are not a product of their own genius alone, but a favor from the most generous. It also creates an optimistic and forward-looking intellectual orientation, one that is constantly striving to learn what it knew not, pushing the boundaries of understanding in all fields of inquiry as an act of gratitude to the divine teacher. The eighth and final lesson from this initial event concerns the process of verification and the integration of the new revelation within the broader Abrahamic tradition. This is illustrated by the actions of Khadijah after hearing her husband's account. Demonstrating immense wisdom, she did not rely solely on her own judgment, but sought the counsel of her cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal. Waraka was a significant figure in Mecca. He was an elderly, righteous man who had rejected idolatry and had become a Nestorian Christian, studying the previous scriptures and transcribing parts of the gospel into Arabic. He represented the remnant of monotheistic Abrahamic scholarship in a polytheistic city. When Khadijah brought Muhammad to him and he recounted his experience, Waraka immediately recognized the signs. He identified the angel as the same Namus, the keeper of secrets, another name for Gabriel, who had come to Moses. He affirmed the authenticity of Muhammad's prophetic call, stating, "This is the same one who keeps the secrets whom Allah had sent to Moses. I wish I were young and could live up to the time when your people would turn you out." Waraka's testimony served several critical functions. Firstly, it provided external validation for the Prophet's experience from a respected, learned, and neutral party, confirming that this was not a delusion but a continuation of the same divine process that had guided previous prophets. Secondly, it explicitly situated Islam not as a new, alien religion, but as the final installment in the long chain of Abrahamic monotheism, connected directly to the revelations given to Moses and Jesus. This established the principle of the continuity of divine guidance. Thirdly, Waraka's prescient warning about future persecution prepared the Prophet for the arduous path that lay ahead, indicating that the message of truth would inevitably be met with hostility from those entrenched in falsehood. This encounter teaches Muslims the importance of seeking knowledge from reliable sources, the value of historical and interfaith awareness to understand their own tradition's context, and the reality that standing for truth often entails facing significant opposition and sacrifice. It shows that true faith is not only affirmed by internal conviction but is also supported by historical precedent and verifiable evidence. Expanding upon the lesson of solitude, the practice of tahanuth engaged in by the Prophet Muhammad before the first revelation offers a detailed template for spiritual development that extends beyond mere physical isolation. It was a holistic exercise involving the disengagement from a spiritually toxic environment, a redirection of focus from material to metaphysical concerns, and an active state of contemplation. The socio-economic fabric of Mecca was built upon a capitalist and tribalist structure that often led to the exploitation of the weak, the poor, and the orphaned. Usury was rampant, and tribal honor, or asabiya, often superseded universal moral principles. The Prophet's retreat was therefore not only a spiritual act but also a form of social and ethical protest. By removing himself from this system, he was able to gain a critical perspective on its inherent flaws and injustices, a perspective that is difficult to achieve when one is fully immersed in and benefiting from such a system. This teaches that meaningful spiritual insight is often preceded by a critical assessment of one's own societal norms and a willingness to question the status quo. For the believer, this translates into the need for periodic self-assessment and a conscious effort to detach from the morally compromising aspects of contemporary culture, whether they be consumerism, nationalism, or other modern idolatries. Furthermore, the act of tahanuth involved not just passive reflection but also acts of worship and charity. Historical sources note that he would take provisions with him and would often feed any poor person who passed by his place of retreat. This demonstrates that true spirituality in Islam is never entirely ascetic or disconnected from social responsibility. The inner purification sought in solitude must be balanced with an outer expression of compassion and service to others. The solitude cleanses the heart, and the charity manifests that purity in the world. This integrated approach prevents spirituality from devolving into self-indulgent escapism, grounding it in the practical realities of human society. The lesson is that the path to divine connection involves a dual movement, a withdrawal inward for purification and reflection, and a turning outward in service and mercy. Delving deeper into the nature of wahi, it is crucial to understand the different forms it took as described in Islamic sources to appreciate the complexity and gravity of the revelatory process. The most difficult form, as mentioned by the Prophet, involved the sound of a bell, which would be followed by the message being imprinted upon his heart. This experience was intensely draining and demonstrates that the transmission of the divine word required a transformation of human consciousness to receive it. Another form was the angel appearing in the form of a man, as occurred in several well-documented instances, where the angel Gabriel would speak to him directly. This form was less physically taxing. A third method was through true dreams, ruya al-sadiqa, which was how the process of revelation began in its earliest stages, 6 months before the encounter in Hira. Whatever he saw in his dreams would come to pass in reality. A fourth, and the highest form, was direct communication from Allah from behind a veil, an experience granted to the Prophet during his celestial journey, the Miraj, and also to Moses at the burning bush. Understanding these variations is theologically significant because it illustrates the multifaceted ways in which Allah communicates with His chosen messengers, tailored to the specific context and content of the message being delivered. It also reinforces the doctrine that the Quran's text is not a single monolithic dictation but was revealed progressively over 23 years, in response to specific events, questions, and challenges faced by the nascent Muslim community. This gradual revelation, tanjim, had a profound pedagogical wisdom, allowing the early believers to absorb and implement the teachings incrementally, building their faith and the foundations of their society piece by piece. The lesson for believers is an appreciation for the divine wisdom in the methodology of revelation, recognizing that the Quran is a living, dynamic guidance that was intimately connected to the human experience of its first recipients, making its lessons eternally relevant and applicable to the unfolding challenges of human life. It also instills a deep sense of respect for the Prophet, who had to bear the immense burden of these diverse and powerful experiences for over 2 decades for the sake of transmitting the message to humanity. The command Iqra and its connection to the pen not only initiated an intellectual tradition but also established a specific epistemology, a theory of knowledge, that is distinctly Islamic. This epistemology is built upon a hierarchy of sources with divine revelation at its apex, complemented and supported by reason and empirical observation. The first command to read what is revealed by the Lord who created establishes that the ultimate source of truth and guidance is God Himself. This revealed knowledge encapsulated in the Quran provides the foundational framework of reality, morality, and purpose, the that which he knew not. However, the verse also valorizes the pen, the instrument of human learning, observation, and science. This implies that acquired knowledge, gained through rational inquiry and study of the natural world, is not only permissible but essential. The Islamic intellectual tradition, at its zenith, saw no conflict between these sources. Instead, it viewed the universe as a second book, a text filled with divine signs that, when read correctly through scientific investigation, would lead back to the same truths found in the revealed text of the Quran. This harmonious vision of knowledge prevented the kind of historical conflict between science and religion that characterized parts of Western history. For instance, scholars like Ibn al-Haytham, the father of modern optics, viewed his scientific experiments as a way to better understand the craftsmanship of the Creator. This integrated epistemology has profound implications. It protects the believer from 2 extremes: a purely rationalist approach that denies the existence of metaphysical realities and a purely fideistic approach that rejects reason and scientific evidence. The lesson from the first revelation is that a complete human being is one who engages both their spiritual and intellectual faculties, reading both the book of God's words and the book of God's works. A failure to do so leads to an incomplete and imbalanced understanding of existence, resulting in either a soulless materialism or a superstitious and irrational pietism. The command to read is thus a command to pursue a holistic knowledge that satisfies both the soul and the intellect. The role of Khadijah as the first believer and primary supporter of the Prophet provides a timeless model for the ideal of marital and community support in the face of transformative, world-changing missions. Her response was not merely passive acceptance, it was an active and intelligent engagement with the Prophet's crisis. First, she provided emotional validation, calming his fears and covering him as he requested. This act of immediate physical and emotional comfort established a safe space for him to process the traumatic experience. Second, she provided intellectual and moral validation by appealing to his established character. Her logical argument that God would not disgrace a man of his virtues was a powerful affirmation that grounded the supernatural event in the known reality of his life. This demonstrates the importance of seeing and affirming the good in others, especially during times of confusion and distress. Third, she took practical action by seeking the wisdom of an expert, Waraka ibn Nawfal. This shows her resourcefulness and her understanding that major life events require consultation with those who possess relevant knowledge and wisdom. She did not act in isolation but leveraged her social and familial network to bring clarity to the situation. Her actions as a whole represent a complete system of support, emotional, intellectual, and practical. In Islamic tradition, she is revered not only as the first Muslim but as one of the 4 greatest women of all time, largely due to this pivotal role. Her example serves as a powerful lesson that belief is not just a private conviction but is expressed through acts of support, wisdom, and courage. For the Muslim community, Ummah, this narrative establishes a foundational principle that great missions and movements are sustained not just by the vision of a leader, but by the unwavering support network of believers who provide comfort, counsel, and resources. Khadija's legacy is a testament to the fact that the first brick in the edifice of Islam was laid not just by a prophet, but by the faith and wisdom of a remarkable woman who stood by him without hesitation. The theological principle of rububiyyah, lordship, introduced in Surah Al-Alaq, carries profound implications for human freedom and social justice. By declaring that allegiance and worship are due only to the Lord who created, Islam performs a radical act of liberation for the human consciousness. In the context of 7th century Arabia, and indeed in many societies throughout history, humanity was enslaved to a multitude of masters. These included the tyranny of idols made of stone and wood, the superstitions associated with celestial bodies, the oppressive authority of tribal chieftains and kings who demanded absolute obedience, and the enslavement to one's own desires and ego, nafs. The declaration of Tawhid al-Rububiyyah, the oneness of God's lordship, systematically demolishes all these false masters. If God is the sole creator, sustainer, and lawgiver, then no created being, whether it be a ruler, a social class, an institution, or even a religious scholar, has the right to demand unconditional obedience or to legislate in a way that contradicts divine law. This principle becomes the theological foundation for resisting tyranny and injustice. It empowers the individual to stand up against oppressive human systems, recognizing that their ultimate accountability is to God alone. Historically, this concept fueled movements of social and political reform within the Muslim world, as it provides a divine mandate to challenge illegitimate authority. Furthermore, by reminding humanity of its common origin from a clinging clot under the authority of a single Lord, this principle dissolves claims of racial or tribal superiority. In the divine economy, all human beings stand as equals in their createdness and their servitude to the one Rabb. The only differentiating criterion, as the Quran states elsewhere, is righteousness, taqwa. The lesson of rububiyyah, therefore, transcends abstract theology. It is a revolutionary social and political doctrine that, when properly understood, serves as a permanent charter for human liberation, equality, and the pursuit of a just society governed by principles that reflect the sovereignty of the divine, rather than the caprices of human power. The specific mention of the alaq, or clinging clot, as the origin of human beings has been a subject of extensive commentary throughout Islamic history, reflecting the tradition's engagement with science and metaphysics. While contemporary discussions often focus on its parallels with modern embryology, classical commentators focused more on its profound philosophical and ethical implications. The medieval theologian Al-Ghazali, for example, used this verse to argue against human arrogance. He would reflect on the journey of the human being from a drop of despised fluid, to a clot of blood, to a fetus in the darkness of the womb, highlighting the utter helplessness and dependence of the human state. For him, any person who truly contemplates this journey cannot possibly feel pride or self-sufficiency, as their very existence is a testament to continuous divine grace and intervention. This perspective makes the study of biology an act of spiritual reflection. The verse serves as a constant reminder that human strength, intelligence, and beauty are all borrowed attributes gifted by a creator who formed them from the most humble of materials. This creates a psychological state of gratitude and humility, which are seen as essential virtues for a believer. Moreover, the verse also implies a sense of wonder and awe at the creative power of Allah. The transformation of a microscopic clot into a complex, sentient being capable of love, reason, and worship is presented as one of the greatest signs, ayat, of God. The Quran repeatedly encourages humanity to reflect on their own creation as a means of strengthening their faith. Thus, the lesson of the alaq is multifaceted. It is a scientific statement that invites empirical study, a theological statement that establishes divine power, a philosophical statement that refutes human arrogance, and a spiritual statement that cultivates humility and awe. It demonstrates the Quran's layered and concise style, where a single word can open up vast avenues of scientific, ethical, and spiritual inquiry, all leading to the same central truth of a wise and powerful Creator. If you want to see more, click the video on screen.